We started with Be Happy, and then we took a couple of weeks. I guess it seemed like forever we were on hard working because had a break in the middle of that. But we're on our third lesson tonight, which is Be Honest. And you know, I think it was in the first week of our getting together that we talked about the problem areas of marriage, and we went through those. Remember what they were? Just real quick. We talked about the 5 problem areas of marriage. Money, in-laws. Those are good on my mnemonic. Religion, good. Wow, y'all write this down somewhere? Y'all just know this? Oh, of course, Kelly's taking it. All right, communication. One more. Okay. Now, put those together in the category because I like 5. You know, 5 steps of salvation, 5 problems areas of marriage. But you mentioned something else along the way that really it was hard to put into one category, and it relates to tonight's lesson. And oftentimes, in trying to build that list, something that will come up is trust. Is that a problem area of marriage? You know, I don't know that it's a problem area of marriage. I think it warrants us looking at it all of its own because it can relate in all of these areas, right? Maybe some more than others. It can impede, it can disrupt in all of those areas. And so I want us to look at the importance of honesty in building up our marriages. When you think about marriage services, when we lived in Colorado, we had a deacon. Have y'all ever heard of Church of Christ Singles? How many have ever heard of that? Okay. Well, one of our deacons started that. His name was Jim Foster. And he wanted to have a Christian alternative to eHarmony. And a lot of folks, now, I think I do this, at least, did any of you meet each other? So they took the better way. They didn't go the eHarmony route. They went the Church of Christ Singles route. eHarmony is the one we think about the most, right? That's the one. There's there's Match.com and there's different ones. eHarmony may have been the pioneers in this industry. And a Wall Street Journal article some years ago by Jane Spencer reveals that eHarmony rejects 20% of all applicants. Do you know why? They lie. Yeah, and so they tried to combat that. You know, because you can think about it, right? Even movies been made about it. You have the profile picture, right? And it's some Adonis, and then it's a guy with 350 pounds when you see him. Something happened there. They're lying about it. And so they had one of their criteria was called the honesty quotient. And the site requires a candidate to fill out a 19-question honesty test to eliminate those that they say paint too rosy a picture of themselves. So there's different ways, and they're pretty crafty about how to ask the questions to really see if you're consistent telling the truth. But what I found interesting that it was sometime later on an eHarmony advice column blog, there was, I don't know the lady's name, but she advised certain emergency lies in a relationship. And you can think about it, right? What are the emergency lies that a worldly advice column for a relationship would encourage you to lie about? Y'all ever heard of the shotgun questions? Right? So the wife comes in, she says, "Honey, does this dress make you look fat?" How do you answer that, right? So some of their emergency lies are things like people's insecurities. So you want to lie about them if they feel insecure about how they look or their appearance, their cooking, whatever it might be. Lying to spare feelings. Lying about your past. So I thought it was very ironic that they said it's important that you not lie to get in a relationship, but it's okay to lie in a relationship. See, we need to look higher than that because I think sometimes the world's thinking infects our thinking, and we can think that way. I like William Harley. It's a classic book. His Needs, Her Needs. Hopefully we'll mention some resources all along the way that can be good for our library. And in this book, he's notable for his rules of honesty. And those rules are in 4 different areas. There is emotional honesty. And he counsels in that to reveal your emotional reactions, both positive and negative, to the events of your life, particularly your spouse's behavior. So perhaps if you're a peacemaker, you're not going to be apt to be honest emotionally about how certain behaviors of your spouse are impacting you. Now, other folks are very free, maybe sometimes too free, without some governors to say what's bothering them about their spouse's behavior. But he says emotional honesty is imperative. Number 2, historical honesty. Reveal information about your personal history, particularly events that demonstrate personal weakness or failure. Don't we like to do that in a marriage? To expose our failures, our weaknesses to our mate. Now sometimes, and we'll get to some of that in this lesson, what can keep us from doing that, from practicing historical honesty? What do we fear? I mean, why would we be afraid? Judgment from our spouse about that. Rejection is definitely something that's feared. And a lot of times we're doing that based on either history in the relationship, but it could also be history in our lives. You know, we're bringing into our relationship the collective baggage of every relationship we've ever had, starting with our parents and in our home and in previous relationships. And so he says historical honesty is very important. Current honesty is a different rule of honesty in his book. He says, reveal information about the events of your day. Provide your spouse with a calendar of your activities with special emphasis on those that may affect your spouse. And then future honesty. Reveal your thoughts and your plans regarding future activities and objectives. Now, we may find that level of honesty uncomfortable. Why in a marriage relationship would we feel uncomfortable with honesty? Well, we're going to talk about that tonight. I thought something was very interesting in preparing this material. I've got a lot of books. I've got 2 full shelves full of books on marriage-related subjects, marriage in the home. And I found it interesting that the subject of honesty is not discussed very much, whether we're talking about secular books or religious authors. Honesty in the relationship. Now, maybe trust issues will come up, but honesty is a core value. It's not a topic that seems to be getting addressed like maybe we should. Why do you think that would be? Why don't we talk about honesty in marriage relationships? Or do we?
There's been times I've tried to be honest about the way I feel about something maybe that's bothering me, and it ends up turning into I didn't realize you felt that way, and then it was just an argument. I felt I want to that anymore.
All right. So intimacy requires disagreement. It requires working through things, but it's an unpleasant process to get there. I think that's a fair statement. So that can be what causes it, for sure. I begin to think maybe it was an oversight. Maybe it's undervalued. Maybe it's undervalued in our society. Maybe we have the eHarmony perspective that it's okay to lie about certain things, and we rationalize and say that we're protecting our spouse by lying about those things. But let me ask this question. What are some areas where couples have difficulty being honest?
Financial.
Okay. All right. Financial things. Well, won't we save ourselves trouble? The 5 problem areas over there on the left. Okay. Let me add maybe some finer points on that. How about we have difficulty being honest about our feelings, about our disappointments, about our desires, about our likes, our dislikes, about anger, about sex, about sins, about failures, needs, about our vulnerabilities. But I think we'd all agree that honesty is one of the foundational principles that has to exist in a marriage for it to be healthy, for it to be happy. So why is honesty so important to a marriage? First of all, we agreed it's important. Okay, why?
Without honesty, you can't have much trust.
Okay, certainly we're going to talk about the trust issue for sure.
I think that is the key thing right there.
Okay.
It erodes trust, and this is just my opinion. Trust is probably, to me, more important in a marriage than love itself, because you can learn to love somebody, and you can love somebody, but you can't love somebody you don't trust.
Okay. So let's take a little time. I'm going to give you 3 answers. I like that. I appreciate that. And I think it's at the heart of what we're talking about. Number 1, honesty is important because of intimacy. How would you define intimacy?
Affectionate.
Okay, affection. Being affectionate.
Togetherness.
Okay. Togetherness. I have close familiarity. Friendship involves intimacy. Closeness. A private, cozy atmosphere. An intimate act, especially sexual intercourse. Closeness of observation or knowledge of a subject. We're talking about they have intimate knowledge of X, Y, or Z. So how does dishonesty stand in the way of all of that? It prevents it from existing. The problem in discussing this is that when we think in terms of honesty and dishonesty, we usually think of big, bold-faced lies. We think of grand theft or adultery. And so we begin to categorize it in that way. And there are definitely some damaging and some graphic examples of dishonesty, but we can compartmentalize dishonesty into little and big categories, can't we? There's big dishonesty and there's little dishonesty. And sometimes we can do that in our marriages, and it can help to undermine our marital strength. So we may think lying, but not deception or insinuation. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. We may think armed robbery instead of corporate theft of property and time. We may think adultery instead of lesser forms of cheating or even flirting. We also think in terms of getting caught versus not getting caught. You ever heard the term moral relativism? All right, so let's break that down. You say it's relative to me. What does that mean? If it's relative, it's all a matter of being relative. Is that different for me and you? Yeah, it's kind of like it's your opinion, right? It's different for you than it is for me. That's the word relative. So you plug that into moral. Moral relativism says what? It all depends, right? And that's a very dangerous place to be. And here's how that affects the subject that we're talking about right now. Moral relativism says that if no one sees you cheating or lying or stealing, then you don't get caught. And if you don't get caught, then it's all right. Because unless you are caught, then you technically haven't done anything wrong. Now, we know the world thinks that way. It can affect our thinking as well. So what we're looking for is talking about a foundation of integrity. And by integrity, I mean the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles no matter what. It's not a matter of having to decide in the moment whether or not we're going to tell the truth, but it's a matter of making the big decision once and for all, no matter what, that we're going to always be truthful. You know, you think about Job. What stood out to God and to the devil about Job? In Job chapter 2 and verse 3. I want you to think back. In the beginning, the Bible says that he was blameless and upright, turning away from evil. That's who he was, right? And you remember what happens after that? That the devil comes into God's presence with the angels, and God says to him, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And you remember what happens after all of that? That God allows him to have free reign on so many of the possessions and the things in Job's life. And you remember he loses everything. And then what happens with Job? What does Job do after that? He falls on his face to the ground. What does he say? Sometimes we even use this phrase. People don't know this is where it's from. The Lord gives, or the King James terms. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Do you remember what happens next? Satan comes back into God's presence again, and God says right off the bat in Job chapter 2 and verse 3, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his what? You remember? Integrity. Although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. Integrity is so vital. Now, several of you guys and ladies either own businesses or work in businesses where integrity is vital. Customer base is made or lost based on the integrity. And if you get a reputation for not having integrity, or the product that you make is not filled with integrity, then you stand to lose financially. But this is a code of morality that God wants us to take into every aspect, and certainly into our marriages. There was a fellow, and the language is a little old. I came across this and I thought this was good. Far too often we're guilty of deception, and there was a Victorian writer by the name of John Ruskin. And Ruskin said this, and listen very carefully to what he says, and we'll break it down if we have to. The essence of lying is in deception, not in words. A lie may be told by silence, by equivocation, by the accent on a syllable, by a glance of the eye attaching a peculiar significance to a sentence. All of these kinds of lies are worse and baser by many degrees than a lie plainly worded. No form of blinded conscience is so far sunk as that which comforts itself for having deceived because the deception was by gesture or silence instead of utterance. All right, we don't exactly talk that way today, but you get what he's saying. How are you doing today? You're not really fine. I said I was fine. But that's not really, that's maybe for a different lesson, but my point is, do you see what I did? I said something, but I lifted my eyes in such a way that I was conveying something else. But with dishonesty, we're talking about, I was, whatever it is, having to do with time, having to do with place, having to do with circumstances, wording it in such a way that technically, like the Pharisees, if you call me on it, I told the truth, but there was insinuation. The point is that works against integrity in relationship. You left the impression that X was what you meant, but Y was really the truth. So how does dishonesty negatively impact intimacy in a marriage? Another resource for you guys is a book by Cloud and Townsend, and it's called Boundaries, and it's a great book. It's one of my favorite ones. Cloud and Townsend say this: deception damages a relationship. The act of lying is much more damaging than the things that are being lied about, because lying undermines the knowing of one another and the connection itself. They also say that deception is the one thing that cannot be worked through because it denies the problem. Intimacy comes from knowing the other person at a deep level. And if there are barriers to honesty, then knowing is prevented and falseness takes its place. So some couples build their relationship on years of lying and withholding truth. And they may preserve a union, but they're destroying any chance of a real relationship. In Ephesians 4 and verse 25, Paul says, "Therefore each of you must put off falsehood and speak truthfully to his neighbor, for we are members of one body." Now that's said to who? Ephesians 4:25 was written to who? To Christians, to the church, right? If that's true for the church, you certainly would think that it's true for the marriage relationship. Genesis 2 and verse 24. "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Or Colossians 3 and verse 9, again spoken to a church, but by application, "Lie not one to another, seeing that you have laid aside the old self with its evil practices." So, when we feel safe enough in our marriage to be totally vulnerable, then what we have is an intimacy that can build a strong and healthy and happy marriage. I think I may have told a story about the Batemans. Do you know about Fred and Susan Bateman? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to tell it like you hadn't heard before. He was born in 1759. And he and his wife got married in 1772, right before his 13th birthday. Things were a little different back in the 1700s. And right after that, he enlisted in, or at least he joined the fight in the Revolutionary War. And not only did he survive the war, but he would go on to live almost 100 years more. He died in 1869. And the fact of the matter is, of course, the Civil War ended in 1865. He lived 4 years longer than the Civil War. That's incredible. But in fact, he was the last known survivor of the Revolutionary War. He would have been 110 years old. But he and his wife, when she died in 1863, they established another record that there's no way anybody is ever going to beat, I don't think. When she died, they had been married for 90 years and 12 days. I mean, a lot of us are going to be happy if we even make it to 90. To be married for 90 years and a little bit of change. Now, they said some things about them at the time, at the end of their life. She was doing needlepoint without glasses at the age of 102. He was spry and humorous and had his mind to the very end. But I thought about that. How did they get along with one another? I mean, they had all kinds of kids, grandkids, great-grandkids all the way down the line with a lot of different names. A lot of Bachman, Bateman, a lot of them came from this couple. But did they have a healthy, strong relationship? Wouldn't you consider it to be just like a long sentence if dishonesty was at the heart of a relationship like that, and distrust? And so you might preserve a union, but without honesty, you're deprived of that intimacy that God wants in the relationship. All right, so we need the grace of honesty for intimacy. Number two, we need it for security. The fruit of honesty is related to this last one that we just mentioned, because if intimacy is the cause, then security is the effect. I don't know if you guys ever went through boyfriend, girlfriend dramas when you were in school. You might remember the name of your first boyfriend or girlfriend. My first girlfriend, as far as I know, 5th grade, as far as I can remember, her name was Georgianne Jones. And I think the reason why I can remember is that we were boyfriend and girlfriend about 5 different times. And it happened the same way every time. Don't call him Bright, because he wasn't necessarily. I would get word, because you know how sophisticated it is in 5th grade. You know, I get a little note from her friend saying, Georgianne likes you. I think if you ask her to go with her, she'll say yes. So I would go and I would say, Georgianne, would you be my girlfriend? And she would say, sure. And then we'd hold hands during lunch. And by the end of the day, she broke it up with me. She'd come back, and she's a cute little girl. Come back and she'd ask me again, and I'd say yes. It took me a few times, but I finally figured that this was going nowhere. You know, I mean, a 5th grader can only take, there's no way for a 5th grader to live. Not knowing he's going to be holding her hand in 5th grade at the end of the day or not. It's been a long time since I've worried about or thought about Georgianne and the way she treated me. That was puppy love, right? That's kind of what that is like. A grade school crush. But the stakes are a whole lot higher in a marriage relationship. When honesty and upfront and open communication does not exist, it breeds a very horrible insecurity. You know, I felt insecure not knowing how she felt, but that was nothing. But in a marriage relationship, we've got to have security. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse 19 says, like a bad tooth and an unsteady foot is confidence in a faithless man in a time of trouble. But what if you're married to that man or to that woman that's faithless? Your time of trouble feels like it's all the time. In Proverbs 31 and verse 11, one of the great things that can be said about the virtuous woman is that the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. And I love the word there for trust. It's the word baltalk, and it means to be so confident that you can care less. You can be bold. You can be secure. You can be confident. You don't have to worry. You're so taken care of that you don't have to take care of yourself. You can rest in the knowledge that what needs to get done will get done. And you can also trust that what is said is truly the truth. Dishonesty erodes that sense of well-being that accompanies trust. Now, insecurity can be two different things. There is an insecurity that exists within, right? Somebody can be insecure inherently, for whatever reason that is. It may be a lack of faith in their own abilities or their own accomplishments. And that's something we can cover in another lesson. And that can be a problem because it can lead to arguments and jealousy and competition. It's an internal one that's built through imagination and irrational fear. But dishonesty can also create an insecurity and a distrust that wasn't there until the lies and until the deceptions are uncovered. If you feel that you cannot trust your partner when you're apart, it's miserable. And it's uneasy. And it's hard to describe that. But on the other hand, trustworthiness and truthfulness contributes to greater security in your spouse. So when we think about how to build up our marriage and having that happy and hard-working marriage, through honesty we build two important things that we've seen so far. And that is that idea of the stability that comes in that security. But then third, I want you to notice with me that by being honest, there's transformation. It's possible, it's probable, in fact, I would say that it's got to almost be the case, that over the course of time, in a relationship that lasts any period of time, this is going to be violent. There is going to be lies and dishonesty, and there has to be rebuilding that takes place. But also alongside of this is a realization of something that I've said in different contexts, and I may have said it in the pulpit, something I heard that really helped me, that when a man and woman get married, that he thinks that she will never change. And she thinks that she will change him, and both of them are wrong, right? Because character is something that you have to take care of yourself. But none of us stay the same. We change, don't we? If you think back to the day that you got married, to the day where you are now, no matter how short or long you've been married, you're changing. You're different than you were when you first got together. But it's a good question to ask, is your marriage different? Is it deeper? Is it better? Is it fuller than it was last year? Than it was last decade? Than it was on your wedding day? And there's no doubt that you are different people than when you started off, but honesty with each other plays a very central role in whether or not the changes are for the better or for the worse. An atmosphere of dishonesty and distrust breeds resentment and jealousy and bitterness and depression and even hostility. And an atmosphere of truth and honesty breeds more than just intimacy and security, but also inner peace and joy and confidence and a spiritual focus. If honesty is good fruit, then dishonesty is choking weeds. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, the Apostle Paul says, and this is a transition in the book of Romans from the doctrinal to the practical. He says, I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So when godliness and Christ-likeness are happening inside of me, I become a different person. So when we think about becoming different people, we're sometimes thinking about physical, relational ways. But in the most fundamental way, we need to be changing who we are spiritually. So when I look at where I'm at spiritually, there needs to be a change. I need to be looking more like Christ all the time. And that's not just going to affect me individually. That should have an impact on the marriage relationship. It's going to pay dividends for the marriage relationship. So when we're dedicated to being completely open and honest with each other, sharing our truest and deepest thoughts and feelings and fears and failures and desires, we individually and together are becoming something different and something better. I don't know who wrote this, but somebody in a poem said, they say that a wife and a husband, bit by bit, can rear between themselves a mighty wall, so thick they cannot speak with ease through it, nor can they see across it, it stands so tall. Its nearness frightens them, but each alone is powerless to tear its bulk away. And each dejected wishes that he had known for such a wall some magic thing to say. So let us build with master art, my dear, a bridge of love between your life and mine. A bridge of tenderness and very near. A bridge of understanding strong and fine. Till we have formed so many lovely ties, there never will be room for walls to rise. So the suggestion is that we're all building in our marriage. We're building walls or we're building bridges. We don't want to keep each other at arm's length, insulating ourselves from one another, and feeling the need to protect ourselves from the other person. But how transforming it is for us not to be chained by secrets or secret emotions or secret sins. All right, so how can we transform our marriages? Through honesty. Let me give you these suggestions that you see before you. Number one, have grace enough to tell the truth. What do I mean? Have grace enough to tell the truth. I'm not talking about you, the teller. There needs to be grace in the relationship. And somebody said it earlier, don't punish the other person for being honest. That doesn't mean there'll be no consequences. But punishment, shame, and condemnation shouldn't be the consequences. And so there has to be built an atmosphere of grace. Number two, give each other free rein to question and check out things with each other. Now this is maybe some uncomfortable territory, but I'm going to trade it anyway. Don't be offended by the other spouse's need to understand some facts that don't seem to add up. Cell phones can be a great stumbling block when it comes to marriages. I mentioned Trey Morgan last week. He quotes a friend who was a district court judge who told him probably 98% of the people that are getting a divorce have been having an emotional affair with somebody that they are not married to that involves texting. Now this is from Pollard again, and I'm sure others that would say this. Don't have a passcode on your phone that your spouse doesn't know. Don't lock your spouse out of your phone. Don't have passwords to emails, social media accounts, or have those accounts that your spouse doesn't know about. Emotional cheating involves an unhealthy relationship with somebody who is of the opposite sex. That may include constantly texting, talking to, or wanting to spend time together with them. And it may also include, and usually does, include hiding the relationship and details about it from your spouse, or deleting things that you don't want your spouse to see. Mental affairs take place with pornography and softcore core porn. It makes your spouse feel ugly and hurt and deceived and lied to and inadequate, and it's an insult and it's disloyal. And so, you need to give each other the free rein to be open and question and to check out things with each other. Number three, police each other when you see that your spouse is not being totally honest. Number four, become a partner in your spouse's life to heal the underlying fears of being honest. For example, if your spouse's fear is, or issue is abandonment, show them that you're not going to treat them like whoever it was that abandoned them in the first place. And then number five, take responsibility for your own dishonesty and its underlying fears. Become a person of the truth that you desire your spouse to be. Sometimes our insecurity can be a deflection because of dishonesties in our own life. A marriage that honors God and that builds each other up must be predicated upon transformation. It's basic to the Christian life. It's basic to the married life. Look with me for just a few moments in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 through 32. My voice is getting a little thin tonight, so if somebody who can read loud will read Ephesians 4, 17 through 32.
This I say therefore, and testify to the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardening of their hearts, who being past feeling have given themselves over to licentiousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. But you have not so learned Christ, if indeed you have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, And you put on the new man, which was created according to God in righteousness and true holiness. Therefore, putting away lying, each one speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ also forgave you.
Okay, so that's 16 verses, but what's the general idea of what Paul was saying to the church here? If you were to try to summarize it as briefly as possible, what would you say? What's his message? How does he start? What's he saying? What does he want them to do? Change. All right. Change from what to what? Oh, there you go. All right. Old man. So the natural assumption to the new man. All right. So what's the old man look like? He does. Now, how does Paul specifically point that out? All right. So let's start back at the beginning. Let's walk through it. It gives a list. What's first on the list?
Lying.
All right. Okay. So here's how you'll see. They'll say, "Wherefore, either put off." He says, "Put off." You might be right. Yeah, I think. Did you say lying was the first? All right. So put off falsehood, depending on your version. What verse is that?
25.
Okay. What's the new man look like? Okay. What's next? All right, what kind of anger would it be? Okay, sinful anger. What verse is that? Okay, what's the new man behavior?
Forgive for the sun goes down.
Okay, we'll probably talk about that. I don't know if I have time tonight, but what that means. But okay, don't nurse it. This is a good way to put it. All right. Stop taking fun out of it. All right, what's next? Stealing. But stand. All right, what's next? All right, don't write well anyway, but it's harder than here. Corrupt words. What verse is that? All right. And what's the antidote? Edify. All right, what's the other one? At least one more. Don't grieve God. All right, and then that goes on into verse 31. Right, that whole big long list, but then what? Kind, forgiving, and so forth. Verse 32. So, what is that a description of? It's a process of what? Transformation. And so we have a pretty good pattern or grid for what God wants us to do to go from this to this. Now, do you want your spouse to be an old man or old woman, or do you want to be a new man or new woman? And so transformation is key, it's vital. But this isn't about you doing that for your spouse. This is about you putting off the old man, being renewed in the spirit of your mind, and putting on the new man, which after God is created in all true holiness and righteousness. And it's going to play itself out. Now, you look through this list, you probably can say that there's some of those things that you do better than other things. Is that a fair assessment? Does anybody feel like they've got this whole list covered? I don't think that Paul would have written it and laid it out there for us if it wasn't something that we struggle with. And you might, because of a weakness of your spouse, struggle in another way. So don't make your spouse struggle in that way, and you watch those struggles that are in your life as you seek to overcome that. All right, let me close with this. There was a third grade teacher named Kyle Schwartz who shared a pretty interesting homework assignment that she gave to her class. And I don't know, they were grade school, I don't know what grade they were. She wanted to get to know them better, and so she gave them a little essay called I Wish That You Knew. And so she wanted to know what they were feeling and weren't sharing with her. I thought this was great. It said things like this: I wish my teacher knew I didn't have a friend to play with. I wish my teacher knew I don't have pencils at home to do my homework. I wish my teacher knew how much I miss my dad because he got put in prison when I was 3 years old. I wish my teacher knew sometimes my reading log is not signed because my mom is not around a lot. Wasn't it great for those children to have a teacher like Miss Schwartz, who could really step in there and to listen to them and to understand the despair and the pain that they felt? We want to conduct ourselves in our married life so that we don't have a spouse that said, I wish I knew how he felt, how she felt. But when we open up and we put down the wall and we build the bridge, we will be building up our marriages. I think it's really a struggle that we face in marriage. It's important for us to overcome if we're going to have built up better marriages like I know that we all will. You know, we thought these were going to be lightweight and feel good. Some of them will be, some of them are going to be tough, depending on where the area is in your married life. But I think as we focus on these and realize it's a process, God can work through our marriages to make them better as we focus on these things. That's all I got tonight. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your attention and your presence.